this global assessment really puts in perspective the huge problems we have around the world now in relation to invasive alien species. And Australia has clearly known this for a very long time. We're used to our invasive species, as you pointed out, but now it's really being recognised as a global problem.
Australia has, well, I think most of us would think that we've got a pretty good record on biosecurity, even though in the past we haven't necessarily done so well. How do we actually stack up, though, on a global stage?
We are, without any question, top of the pack. Us and New Zealand lead the world in biosecurity, and that's why us being involved in working with other countries to produce this assessment has really been able for us to provide our knowledge and understanding and research to support the assessment and show what could be achieved globally.
You've been able to put an actual number on it for Australia in terms of how much this actually costs us. Can you tell us about how you came to that number? Actually, even what that number is. It's staggering, and I want to hear you say it, to be honest, and what it actually represents.
Well, look, so as part of the assessment, we looked at over 19,000 records of impacts of invasive alien species around the world. All of those were individually evaluated. And we looked at economic impacts, but we also looked at impacts on Indigenous communities and the quality of life that Indigenous communities get from the environment. But the headline figure we have is an economic one, so it's lots to do with the costs to agriculture of invasive alien species and the costs of management. And the global figure is $423 billion, and the Australian figure in that is $25 billion a year.
That's just staggering amounts of money. And of course, it's not just the actual economic loss, is it? It's no. Also that cultural connection, especially as you said about that Indigenous people in particular have.
Yeah, so we recognise this figure is really just the tip of the iceberg, right? It's nowhere near the true costs because we don't yet have systems to be able to properly calculate impacts on the environment. And we certainly don't have systems to be able to really understand how to measure and quantify impacts on Indigenous livelihoods and local communities that suffer from invasive alien species in the context of agriculture. So one of the outcomes of this assessment is that we're starting to develop a roadmap to be able to really understand what the broad impacts are. But they're in the trillions of dollars, not the millions of dollars, billions of dollars. Sorry.
Now, your group is sometimes called the IPCC of biosecurity. Is it time that we really take a global look here? I mean, Australia right now is under threat from the varroa mite, and that's potentially going to cause some real devastation, not only for our beekeepers and apiarists, but also all of those industries that rely on bees for pollination. Is this really something that we've got to get a grip on globally?
Look, absolutely. Just to correct you, we're the IPCC equivalent for biodiversity, not biosecurity.
Oh, sorry.
So it's really about all of the elements of the environment and how the environment interacts with climate change. And invasive alien species are one of the top 5 drivers globally of biodiversity loss, and they're the number 1 in Australia, particularly in relation to threatened species. So that's why this particular assessment is so important. But as you say, in Australia, we have these challenges. Even though we have an amazing biosecurity system, and everybody respects that prevention is the best strategy, stuff still gets in, and that's what we saw with varroa mite. And we always have to be ready and be prepared and have systems in place, and Australia's had an amazing response to the incursion of varroa mite.
From an Aussie point of view, but perhaps also globally if you want to stretch it further, what's your number 1 recommendation at this point? What should we be doing and focusing on most?
I think what IPBES is around linking science to policy. It's really about step change in global policy. So as part of the assessment, we found that 80% of countries have not yet really got any activities going around effectively trying to manage invasive alien species, even though we've shown in Australia and New Zealand that managing invasive species, right from prevention through to control, is highly effective and can be. There are obviously challenges. And so I think what the importance of the report is it provides, on the one hand, a global management guide to invasive alien species, but it shows how management can be linked to policy and effective policies, many of which have already been developed and implemented in Australia, if implemented globally. And it's a global problem, so we all have to work together in terms of funding the science, in terms of developing the best policy. And if we work together, we can meet some of these global targets we've set ourselves under the Convention of Biological Diversity for managing invasive alien species.